Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed our previous episode with former WWE superstar Santino Marella. Right? That was a super entertaining bucket list moment for me. And definitely check him out on Impact if you're able to. But I'm back today with a brand new guest, and I'm actually surprised it's his first time on. Been talking to him for a long time. Want to welcome to the podcast for the very first time, Mr. Steven Joyner. How you doing today, Steven?
Hey, Fabian, what's up, man?
Hey, so, it is your first time on, but you have a long history with this podcast, I've talked about you on the podcast before because people are like, how did you get so-and-so? How did you get so-and-so? I'm like, Steven Joyner, man, this is the guy who put us in touch.
Yeah.
You know?
How long has it been?
Wow, man, I want to say at least I started during the pandemic, 2019. So,
oh my God, it has been
2020.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it's 2020, right? So like 3 years. Yeah.
Dude, we've done a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot how we met.
That's what I'm going to get into, and so we'll talk about, what it is exactly you do. But yeah, so I remember getting on Facebook and joining all kinds of different podcast groups when I started the podcast. And It was interesting because a lot of them are like, oh, let's support each other. I'll follow you. You follow me. Listen to my podcast. I'll listen to yours. I'm like, well, shit, that sounds cool. Like, let's support each other. Nobody did shit on there. Right. They're just on there trying to, toot their own horn, promote their own thing, and nobody's going to support anybody. You put, sometimes I put a question out there like, is there anybody who wants to talk about this? Let's book something. I'm willing to talk to anybody. No response. Right. And then I get a message from you saying like, hey, I'm a publicist. I book people on podcasts, and it wasn't just like, hey, listen to this podcast. It was more like, give me a call. Right. Let's talk, blah, blah. I'm like, well, shit, that sounds pretty legit, as opposed to what I've been getting. So I'm like, yeah, let me talk to this guy, right? And it was really interesting because our first phone call, you already got me on the horn with like two other people. I'm like, oh shit, like this is fast paced.
I did, yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to remember, and it's really cool to be on a podcast. I don't really do interviews at all. Fabian will tell you, but I put together more interviews in a year than I'll ever do in my life. That's for sure. Ever, but I remember when we first talked because we're both SoCal kids. We're both from Southern California. And I did. Yeah. You were like, holy shit, this is real. You know how I feel about those podcast groups, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're okay. And other podcasters listen to your show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's my thoughts. This is my words about the whole thing. Hey, Fabian, I'm Steve. Let's support each other. Da da da. I do a podcast. You do a podcast. I think it's a weird competition thing. I don't think they support each other. One of the things I hate is when I would see like, hey, drop your link and I'll, follow you and shit like that. I don't like it, and I think it's a lot of, I want you to do good, just not as good as me going on in there. I really do. And then you get the guys from India who want to sell you Apple downloads, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, all of that. It is that crabs in a bucket mentality where it's like you're trying to get out there, right? But everybody's just dragging you back down. And you're absolutely right about the Indian or the dudes from Nepal.
They're from everywhere, not just India. I'm not saying India, but they're overseas. Because the verbiage. Hello, Mr. Fabian. How are I want to sell you, but I don't know, man. It's a trip.
Well, I know. Yeah. I know mostly from my end because I've seen the statistics of the people that are contacting me that are listening. They're from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. Like, I'm like, no, I don't want to buy followers. I want real listeners.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I were a podcaster like you, I would rather have 30,000 real people as opposed to 300,000 make-believe people. And I think that these guys have a wonderful scam going on as far as what they've narrowed in on a thing. But I think that all the podcasters are hip to this now. At least they should be. But I think they prey on the new podcasters. So if a podcaster hears this and you go to a group and you're just starting your podcast, like Fabian did years ago, and you see a dude from Nepal or India who wants you to hire him to get you on Apple and Spotify, don't fall for that because it's not real.
Yeah. No, and I can see the pressure. Like if you're, look, and this isn't me because I honestly, I do it for fun. My whole thing has been this whole time is just, I do this for fun. I'm not trying to make money. I'm not trying to get famous. Some people and some of the other podcasters you put me in contact with, like, this is how they want to make a living. I'm like, okay, first of all, in my head, I'm like, pipe dream, right? You've got to be really, really good. You've got to stand out. And if you do, great, congratulations, and I wish you the best. But a lot of them are not original, right? A lot of them, they're not entertaining. I mean,
Well, we're not here to hate on anybody, but we won't name names. But there are podcasters who, and I'm not, I'm not gonna, even if it's Fabian knows there's people I don't even talk to, and he knows who they are, but I don't wish them anything bad. But the thing is, we're realistic. There's a lot of podcasters, this, Fabian, they do like 5 episodes. I'm Joe Rogan. I'm the greatest thing ever, and they lose themselves. But with you, man, you have a devil may care attitude. You just chill. And look how successful you've grown without actually doing much. It's the guys who go into overkill that you know the types I'm talking about. But guys like you and Chewy, you just do a show and that's it.
Yeah, and to me that's what it's all about. It's all for fun right now because the market is so saturated with podcasts that again, you have to really stand out, and the way you're going to stand out is a genuine personality. Maybe you're going to have great topics or good guests, but if you're just doing everything everybody else is doing, I don't know how many people. Yeah, I don't know how many people are going to really tune into that. It's kind of like for some. Look, again, I wish everybody success, but for some, it's kind of sad because they're like promoting, their Patreon and help us with this, and it's like, dude, you have 100 followers. Like, who's listening to you? I don't even think you have like 500 people that listen to you on a weekly basis, and I'm not a huge podcast. I'm not trying to put myself over, but I'm saying be realistic. If I have five listeners, I'm like, hey, cool, I have 5 people listening to me,
it's quality, not quantity. You know what I'm saying? You could, you never trip on numbers. And what's funny is we'll get into all this, but and I'm not downing. I'm not a podcaster, so I'm not going to down a podcaster. And I did a show for like a month just for fun, but it's kind of hard to interview people that I know very well. Like, so tell me, how'd you get started? But I look at it totally different. As far as guests goes, when we start talking about guests, I'll throw what my take on guests. But people who trip on numbers, you're right. There's a lot, and I don't think they're really mean spirited. We know a lot of guys and a couple women. They just want to be like, hey, I got this kick-ass show. And Rome wasn't built overnight for some people, but they get really, what I'm saying, man. I mean, they get, but guys like you and a couple other folks who just, I like doing it. It's a hobby. It's a little fun. And it just starts to take off. I mean, it will. There's one total. Can I cuss?
Oh, I don't know, Steven. I don't know. I start every episode with the fucking is shit. Why not?
Sorry. I try not to swear too much, but I can't swear when I mention. There is this fat, pasty, white motherfucker in Kansas. And I'm not even going to say his name because he's not even worth acknowledging. Who I'm talking about. And this guy, if you look at his YouTube videos, I'm his highest YouTube. He's talking shit about me. The one guy, and I don't even know the clown. He reached out to me. He wanted guest, and I didn't want to fuck with him. This is the story. I didn't want to fuck with him. So I said, well, I'm going to charge you a shit ton of money. He's all, I don't pay for guests. I'm like, okay, good. I'm like, fuck you. He's all, fuck you too. Later. That was it. And then like when my sister died a year ago, this idiot does a video saying that I did this and I did that. And you know what? I thought I could go after this guy or just let him be. But what's funny is all of his other videos, I'm his highest downloaded video but it's like, he was like, well, I don't know. He's just going on about me. And then he challenged me to a fight. He wanted me to come to Kansas and fight. I'm like, dude, I'm from South San Diego. I'll just find you. I don't know, dude. It was funny shit. But but he did it. Where I was going with this was he did a video and he's all, I don't believe that hard work creates success. It's like, of course not. That's why you're in fucking Kansas and you're sitting, I mean, dude is despicable. Absolutely. He's garbage.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it does, some things, do get kind of toxic here because again, people have these aspirations of, being famous and making themselves known. And so, when they feel like you're not going to benefit them or it's going to, take too much work or it's going to cost too much, right? They tend to lash out like that. And so, yeah, I think I've you and I have talked and you've had a lot of like, would-be clients or former clients where it just hits the fan like that. Yeah.
It's a lot of do for me, not for thee. And you know what? Like, and I mean, okay, I'm nothing special. Okay. I just happen to grow up in a part of California. Fabian's from California. And it's not hard for guys like us to run into people who you'll see in movies and TV or sports, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you just interviewed a wrestler last week, and a big one. So what I'm saying is that it's not hard for us, but I guess if you live in Kansas or someplace like that, that's a big deal. But for us, it's like, whatever. I was lucky enough in my life to meet a lot of great people who did some pretty cool stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of them have been lucky enough to go on Ignorance is Strength. And that's it, really. That's really it. I mean, I book people on shows, I connect things.
Yeah.
And I don't love it as much as I used to. But Fabian has been a really good friend. Oh, dude, it has been almost 4 years, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. No, it was 2019 because it was right as it was December of 2019. I do remember. And then we start. Yeah. But the point is that I don't know. I'm probably going to switch gears and do something else with my life. I'm going to go back to school. I don't know. But I'm dead serious about this. But Fabian and I became friends. And like we talked about health issues. I mean, you and I have had some, remember?
Yeah.
Remember when we were talking about being a vegetarian one day?
How that's going to cure the world. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, and Fabian has, I've talked to him and we've shot the shit about real life stuff. And when you click with someone like that, that's cool. But as far as this dude in Kansas, he reached out to me and I looked at his show. I'll tell this to anybody. I look at a show and I'll be like, yeah, do I feel comfortable sending my friend there, to be interviewed by someone? And if I don't, I will be like, I don't think it's going to work. But this guy was very persistent. And so I said, fine, I'll submit him a big bill and I know he'll go away then. Right. Mm-hmm. And I thought he would, but instead he decides to get all uppity, whatever, he's all, I challenge you to an MMA fight. I'm like, shit. Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to start training, let me know. I got a few years of wrestling under my belt, but besides all of the nonsense with that, right?
No, but real quick, as far as MMA goes, and that's a badass sport. But Fabian, between you and I, and some of your listeners will understand this. Some of them don't. Some of them will not, and it's for their own good. You know our homeboy Juan Vasquez, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
We came out of those Varios. You understand? Mm-hmm. We weren't MMA. You understand what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. Stephen Joyner, the Miklo of modern day.
I was the widow in the fucking barrio, man. There was always one of us that lived there.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, we weren't MMA guys. So I told, look, if I'm gonna go to Kansas, I'm gonna, it's gonna end bad.
Well, I mean, you say that wearing your Dodgers jersey, so if nobody believes you,
no one can see me though.
Right. Now,
anyway,
the game has changed, right? You're an entertainment guy. You did publicist work, right? I don't know public relations if it's the same thing, but and I don't know if around the time that COVID was happening, if the well kind of dried up on things like that. But you pivoted and you started putting people together on podcasts, right? And that to me was like, that's really cool because everybody's starting a podcast now, right? And so you saw value in that, right? And you're like, let me connect people, let me put people together, and this is something I can do, And I don't think too many people really thought of that, but you did. What made you jump into this whole connecting people on podcast thing?
Oh, okay. So here's where that came to be. And sorry to your listeners about me going on about that redneck. I just had to get it done. Okay. So here's what happened. The pandemic was horrible. People died. People got sick. I got COVID. He got COVID. It was a bad deal. However, I do know that people wanted escapism. And there's only so much Tiger King shit you can watch on TV. You're locked down. No, for real. And people are on their phones all the time and they're listening. So it was a good time as far as podcasting, so to speak. Yeah. There were literally over 300 different podcasts that I knew. You were one of them. And I would be like, okay, I'll use Larry. Like Larry is a dude. Larry Hankin is an old actor that I put on a lot of shows as a character actor. Fabian's interviewed him like two times, right?
Three times.
Three. Okay. 3 times. He's a wonderful guy. I'd book him on shows and that's that. Well, Larry was the one that got me thinking, okay, let's say you interviewed him one week and then Rico interviewed him the next week, right? Mm-hmm. I thought, man, why don't I put Fabian and Rico together or so-and-so together and say, hey, man, how was your interview with him? Good. Hey, what do you like about doing your show? Well, that, because people who listen to podcasts or see podcasts, they just see the dude or hear the guy's voice and think, oh, they just turn on a microphone. It's hard work, is it not? Pre-show prep, links, making sure someone's going to show up. We were talking about this before we went on the air. Your previous guest, the time changes, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of work. So I thought it'd be interesting to cross-promote, cross-pollinate shows. So if you're interviewing another podcaster, his audience hears you and discovers you and vice versa. You may have similar shows, but you're not identical. And they'd be like, okay, I can listen to Rico's podcast at 3 and then Fabian at 5. It's called variety, and you guys are helping each other build up. That's why in those groups, I want you to do good, but not as good as me. There's a lot of shit in there I don't like. Mm-hmm. But so I thought it'd be interesting to, and also you and other podcasters, I thought you guys aren't just sounding boards. Mm-hmm. You have shit to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. So why not, hey man, you're going to interview Chewy. Yeah, Chewy's got a lot, and then oh my God, I have a lot in common with this guy besides podcasting. Mm-hmm. Or, what I'm saying, man, I mean, Matt, guy that, just whoever. And then it's because whenever I put, this is something that's important, this, whenever I put anybody on a show, it's not like, I tell the podcaster, hey man, you're just so lucky to be interviewing so-and-so, you call him Mr. And I don't do that shit. Be polite. Yeah. But I let the talent know, the guest, I let them know, hey man, you're lucky to be going on Fabian's show because he's giving you your time and you're going to be able to go on there and, show your book or whatever. Right. So it's really about respect but the cross-pollinating, podcasters, they don't do that. They don't guest on each other's show. And I thought, why not? Mm-hmm. It's so obvious. I mean, yes, I can send you a guest, but why not put you on a show? You got a story to tell. You're not just a sounding board. And I don't know, man. They don't, but they don't want to do that because I believe that there are podcasters who say, well, man, if I get Fabian on my show, he may be better than me, and I don't want that on here. I believe that shit, man. People have egos, and everybody does. It's the podcasters do, and that's my feelings. But but what I do is I try to get people who I know will have a lot in common, whether the way they were brought up, whatever, culturally, you name it. But then I also like to be like I put people on your show that you probably would never have dealt with. And you know what I'm saying? It's like, man, this guy lives in Ohio. What the hell am I going to do with, And man, we got a lot in common. That's what I like to do. It's not just the differences, it's the similarities.
Yeah. And, on my end, I was always like, well, I don't turn anybody away. I will interview anybody you put in front of me, Yeah,
that's what I love about you. You're like, man, I'll talk to you. And you've talked to some interesting people, man.
Because everybody has something to say. I even if you think you're like, Joe Blow asshole, like, I don't care. Like, you have a story. Everybody has a story, I started the podcast just talking to random people that I knew from, high school, from my life, my family, whatever, just people that have interesting stories to tell. And then, I started getting in contact with you, you put me in contact with people, and I'm like, all right, now we're expanding the field a little bit, right? It's not just people that I grew up with. Now it's people I've never heard of before, but even if they're not famous, even if they're, haven't written a book or anything like that, what do you have to tell the world? And that's my favorite part, because it's like, now I have to dig. Now I have to do my part, and I have to make this interesting. And it's a challenge, and I love a challenge. Now, I did want to, give Larry a bunch of props here. And
Yeah.
Larry Hankin is one of the most interesting people I've ever talked to in my life. And I've had the privilege of talking to him 3 times. Right. And I thought, his philosophy and approach to being on podcasts is great, because I asked him the first time, I'm like, you've been doing the rounds, Larry, like you've been on a lot of podcasts, but a lot of people, in a similar position as you, who have been on TV, they've been in movies, like they don't do podcasts as often as you. I'm like, the only other person that I know has done as many as you is maybe like Bruce Valanche, right?
Yeah. Another guy I know.
Yeah. And he goes like, well, if it's, 1,000 years here, 500 years here, 200 years there, like I'm expanding, my audience at that point. More people are listening to my story. And you know what? I venture to say that in the last, 2-3 years, Larry Hankin's name has been in more mouths than ever in his life. Now,
I'm going to tell you something interesting. I'm going to tell you something interesting about that. Go ahead, but I'm going to tell you something really interesting.
Yeah, because I'm not saying like he's more famous than he's ever been, right? Because he's been in a lot of big shit. But, I think as far as like knowing who he is, what his name is, right? More people now know who he is, and they know Larry Hankin instead of just that guy, right? Because he's been on so many podcasts and people have heard his name for the first time. Maybe they're like, oh, I saw him before. I don't quite know who he is. But now you know.
When I met Larry, he had never done a podcast. Here's what happened. So I met Larry through a mutual friend of ours named Carl Gottlieb. And Carl's the guy that wrote the movie Jaws and The Jerk. And him and Larry go back before you and I were even thought of, man. And anyway, he got me in touch with Larry. And I said, hey, Larry, can I borrow you for an interview? He said, what do you mean? I'm like, a podcast. He said, what are those? He didn't know. This was 4 years ago. I don't know how many shows I put him on. I remember when he was writing the book and all that. Okay, and I booked him on a couple of interviews. I'm like, do you like that? He said, yeah, it's cool. Next thing I know, fast forward a year after I first meet him. I mean, I don't know how many, Fabian, I have no clue. I asked you like 3 times. It blows my mind, how many shows I put him on. I'm not taking credit for his story, because he's a celebrity without, I just put him in a whole different world. The guy's in his 80s. So, I mean, I threw him in a whole different world. And everybody who interviewed him, thank you to everybody who ever interviewed him, because he's a mensch. He's a great guy. But I remember his funny shit. So like I got him on a show. He did great. Fast forward a year, right? I got him on the phone with a show somewhere, right? And the guy didn't do video. And Larry's all, hey man, you got to do video. Like he's starting to school the podcaster. He's like, it just looks better. He's all, are you using Zoom or StreamYard? I'm like, damn, Larry. I'm like, he's schooling the podcaster. He's like, yeah, you got to do StreamYard. He's all, looks real good, man. You like, what's your backdrop? I mean, I'm like, damn. People have asked me many times, and I'm sure they've asked Larry, like, hey, Larry, you should do your own podcast. He doesn't want to do it. He's a guest. He likes being a guest. He doesn't want to do a show. I do have a dream though, and I hope you're the guy that does it. Here's my dream. I want to see Larry and Tommy Chong on a show together.
Oh yeah, I had that same thought. Yeah,
that's my dream. I want to see you in one Windows with Larry and one Windows Tommy.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
Boom.
Like they're both, they're the same age. I think they've both done a shitload of stuff, and they're both super interesting. Like they can talk for days. I thought the same thing, but I'm like, damn, how would that happen? I'm like, I don't think it would be that hard. It'd just be about timing, but that would be like amazing.
Well, for your audience, I love Cheech and Chong. I grew up with it, but I never met Tommy Chong. Never met him. I had a client named Richard Avila's Rico, and he did a podcast. I don't really, he's doing his own thing now. We haven't talked in a long time, but Rico was one that met Tommy, and he said, hey man. And I said, hey, I know people would love to interview Tommy Chong. And Rico basically said, sure. And he got you in touch with him. I never talked to Tommy Chong, never met him. But it was great to see people like you and other people get this opportunity to interview one half of one of the greatest comedy teams ever, and you had a blast. But what's interesting is I've seen Tommy on your show and Richard's show and other shows. he's an interesting dude. He's funny, but he's really intelligent. Like Larry, you know them as these characters. But I've had this. They're both to me. They're two old hippies. I want to see the two. I just would love to see them talk to each other and like one guy facilitated. I mean, I'm telling you, Larry and Tommy can talk about, I don't know, a can of soup and make it sound interesting and make you think of shit you never thought of. You know what I'm saying? They could talk, you know what I'm saying, Fabian? Yeah. I've heard Larry go on about things and be like, holy shit, dude, I never thought about that. You know, but that's my dream, is to see those two guys. I guess if you reached out to Larry and then you reached out, because Richard always facilitated Tommy, I guess it's possible, but why no one's done it yet? Think about this, man. This is spontaneous. This is fucking awesome. That's a 2-hour show, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, that's easily 2 hours. I would say, man, you could go probably 3 on that one, but yeah, I thought the same thing, because I'm like, man, these two guys are like similar in age. They must have at some point, you know, known the same people. I don't know if they met each other, but you know, at least they've met the same people, worked in similar circles. But I think a collaboration between the two would be really good.
I never asked Larry if he met Tommy. I don't think I did. I think they must have, because you got to think in the 70s, Cheech and Chong was through Paramount Pictures, right? Larry was doing movies with them. They had, but like, I know they both met Steve Martin. I know that. Yeah. But you know what? I don't know how these two could have avoided each other. But yet I have met old people, like you interviewed a guy who was very good friends with Robin Williams, Mark.
Yes.
And I asked Mark, I'm like, did you ever meet John Belushi? No. I'm like, well, damn, you guys are running in the same circles. Never did. So, but it'd be cool nonetheless for these two to meet if they haven't. Because I'm telling you, they're if you look at both personalities, they could be like stepbrothers, man.
Now, with you know, people like that you've sent me that are kind of like, you know, again, everybody is interesting, right? But those people that have been known as like celebrities, that have been known on TV and movies and things like that, those people, you know, my strategy is like, well, don't get all like worked up and be like, oh, you know, there's somebody famous. Like I have, and you know, I have a good casual conversation with them. You know, but my thing is always, you know, in back of my head, I'm like, I hope they enjoyed it, they felt comfortable, and they would do it again, you know. And so I wanted to ask you, because I remember you prepped me one time before Larry Hankin, and you're like, listen, you're going to get him on there, you know, you got to be respectful, you got to know a little bit about his career. Because you sent him to like these 3 or 4, I don't know how many guys it was on the podcast, but like, I'm not going to mention their names. They're like a group of like college frat boy stoners.
They didn't know shit,
and they didn't know a goddamn thing, right? Yeah. I remember, and I interviewed them afterwards as well, right? Yeah. Because you sent me them, and I'm like, man, you guys kind of shit the bed on that. I'm like, you open up and you introduce yourselves, and then you say like, and then you stay like quiet, and then Larry. You know, Larry, he's very
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's been a while too, but here's the thing.
Real quick, sorry. Larry just chimes in and he goes like, "Well, I guess that makes me Larry." I'm like, man, you know. And at some point, you know, they're doing like their spiel, and he gets real frustrated. He goes like, "Come on, guys, you got to know what you're doing," you know. And I'm like,
"Oh yeah." I got a phone call off of that interview. By the matter of fact, he's all, Steve, man, what the hell? Larry doesn't really go cuss, right? But he's like, those two guys didn't know shit about me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I called up those 3 guys. I hope they're doing good, but I never sent them another soul after that. You know, I mean, I sent them to your show, and you know, you did the interview with them. But I said, hey, man, if you're going to interview someone, I'm interviewing Fabian. At least, okay, he grew up here, learned something, right? It doesn't take that hard. But Larry's one of these guys that you could look up his IMDb, and I guarantee you, there's some movie in there that you like that he was in. I mean, it's not the fact that they just blindly had the dude on there, and it was so lazy. And I know you're talking about that intro. I remember that intro. It was awkward and it sucked, and it was bad. But you know, maybe whatever. You know, we can't worry about other people's shows. You know,
yeah. But I guess my question there was, you know, you set a lot of people up, and sometimes, you know, it's very good, very successful. You know, they enjoy themselves. You ever get like some feedback back from people that are like, you know, besides Larry, and it's like, why the hell did you set me up with them? Like, how often does that happen?
Yeah. Not as much as it used to. When I started out, it was pretty frequent because I just assumed that they knew something about the person I sent them. And so originally, yeah, or it sucked, or it didn't go good, right? Now like I told you, hey man, watch this, read about so and so, do something, and you're really good at research. But some people, they just said, oh, I'll just wing it. I'm like, man. And when you wing it, you could be like, well, man, fuck, I forgot that dude was involved in this, and I didn't even ask because I was too lazy to. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you don't have to do a deep dive. It behooves you to do a deep dive, but I'm just saying, when you're that lazy, my late mother used to say, don't do 50 things half-assed. Do one or two things really, really good.
Yeah.
And that's true. But if you say, okay, I'm interviewing Fabian, I don't know anything about him, but I'll just wing it.
Yeah.
So tell me your story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where do you want me to start? Yeah.
but are you going to ask me, like, do you know any talking points? I don't know, but that's what. But yeah, I used to get those calls quite a bit. It happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens.
And it's not that much prep. Look, even myself, I like to say I wing it, but I do an educated wing it, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. It's like you look up the bullet points, maybe you watch a couple clips here and there. You're like, okay, I got a feel for them. If they're like a musician, an actor, whatever. Now, if I don't know anything about them, like if you're sending me like an author, and I'm not going to read their book, first of all. I'm telling you.
You're honest about it, though. There's the thing. That's what's important. You're not going to read their book.
But I will look it up, or I'll look them up in their social media and be like, what are they all about? Right. Maybe if I get absolutely nothing, I at least know where they live, and I can pick on that and be like, tell me about, I don't know, Tennessee, wherever they live. And so it's gotta be something. You can't just go in cold and be like, hey, who are you? What's up with you? Like it doesn't work that way.
I've heard you interview authors, and I know that you read like the back book jacket, kind of a glossed over. At least you did that. Okay, so your book's about World War II, chemical labs, yeah, and then you lead in. At least you do something. But when you go on there just blind as shit, it's bad. And also I love it when a podcaster would reach out and be like, send me a list of your people. No, I'm helping you, and I am asking them to take a leap of faith. But it's funny, Fabian, you know what I'm talking about. Their shows, we're not naming names, but just in general, they think they're the greatest. And you're right. They have like 100 views. Well, we're not interested in that person. We'd like to talk to, some dude that I don't even know. It's like, man, even if I did, I wouldn't. They should, they're ambitious. Let's put it that way, but they're not realistic. But what I like about you and shows that I've worked with in the past, even guys I don't talk to, is some of them, even though they don't know the person or they're whatever, at least they treat them with respect. That's the main thing,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. Like I said, I turned down nobody, and that's because, and I don't mean this negatively. I mean this realistically. That's because in the grand scheme of things, I know I'm nobody. Right. But obviously I'm not saying, I'm not degrading myself. I'm not, whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, nobody knows who I am. Right. And so if I'm interviewing somebody else, nobody knows who you are. Well, at least let's give them something to listen to. Let's give them something interesting.
Yeah. Nobody really knows who I am. I like it that way. I like being a behind the scenes guy. I couldn't do what you guys do. But the thing is that also when you interview somebody, okay, you can interview Larry, and Larry's a great guy. He's been around forever. But then the next week you interview a guy that's not as well known, but in 5 years, that fucking dude could be all over the place. Be like, shit, I interviewed that dude back in the day. See, people are so short-sighted. They're like, well, what's his following? This, that. It's like, not much, but he's doing amazing shit. In 5 years, you're lucky if you get that guy in there. I don't,
And it could go the other way too. Look, you once sent me somebody who was like, who had broken into the Billboard charts, right? And nice person and everything, but like, and then now this person is not doing too well, right? And doesn't
I don't remember the dude. Should I initials?
S.
Uh-huh.
No, that's all right. Well, I'm like,
tell me off the air because I'm trying to remember. Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
And it could go the other way, right? Where you're having like the greatest, success of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, well, I guess, I'll do the podcast. And then it goes the other way and you're stuck. You're not doing anything anymore. You're not making any money, and so I think you really have to take those opportunities when they come, right? Because now it's like, well, nobody wants to talk to you anymore, right? And you didn't take those opportunities to build those bridges and build those relationships with people who can still keep your name out there and be relevant. I'm not saying I had like this particular person, I had a great experience. It was a great conversation. People gave me good feedback, but I'm saying at any moment in time, right, you can go upwards or you can go downwards, right? And so having those bridges built, it's going to benefit everybody, because
it is. And really, when I put shows together, see, I don't do favored nations. It's not like, oh my God, Fabian, you're so lucky to be interviewing so-and-so, man. No, they're lucky to be on your show. That's how I look at life, dude. I don't do this like, oh, his name and his bank account may be bigger than you, and that's it. But at the end of the day, you could get cancer, he could get cancer. I really make it level shit, man. And people don't get that. Well, some people do. But also it's like, when I've introduced you to other podcasters and you become friends with these people and you're cross promoting and doing. Remember when I try to put together like a podcaster thing, like 12 you guys, and I there's a reason behind that. And but you also become friends with the person. And then, it's really about that. I'm not always the easiest guy to deal with. I deal with a lot of bullshit because it's funny. I have a thankless job sometimes. I'm not a saint. I can be a total fucking asshole to people. Anybody could, right? But the thing is that sometimes I'll help a show and then they'll want something and I can't deliver it. Then I'm just bad all of a sudden. It's like, oh, you forgot about all this shit I did. And then, I'm saying it's personalities. And I've been in the wrong many times, Fabian. I've been in the wrong many times. It is what it is. Sometimes people are supposed to be in your life for a month. Sometimes they're supposed to be there for 50 years, man. And I have a saying that I never lose, Fabian. I either win or I learn.
Yeah, very good.
That's it, man. And the thing is that, I've had people like, oh, that motherfucker, just going off on me. It's like, yeah, but wasn't this the guy that put fucking Bruce Valanche on your show? And wasn't this the guy that helped you? No, that gets forgotten. That's the funny thing about life, Fabian. You could be dating a woman forever and do all this great shit for her, but you do one thing wrong. Minuscule, right? People are not even just family, friends. You grow up with somebody, he's your friend, and you do all stuff for him, and then one day you can't, I don't know, bail him out of jail or pick him up. Then you're all fucking, you really learn who's who,
Yeah, it's for sure. And and it's like when you get the ball rolling for them, it's like, oh, it's all fucking sunshines and rainbows and everything. And you're right, as soon as it's like, well, no, I'm not going to do that for you. Well, it's like, well, fuck off then. It's like it's unfortunate. Now, you mentioned being a thankless job, and I've seen before like the amount of work that goes into being a publicist essentially, and how many phone calls, how many podcasts, how many interviews do you set up? Like I know you talk to a lot of people. Like I said, the first conversation I had with you, you already have me on the horn with like 3 people.
I do remember that. Yeah, honestly, in the last 4 months, not as much as I had, because I've been dealing with health stuff, and so I was kind of, not, but like 4 months ago, oh my God, man, dude, I was booked. I would make 12 calls a day. I'm not exaggerating. Hey, Fabian, hold on a minute. Hold on, Fabian. And I call somebody emergent. Hey, Fabian, so, and I can put things together. That's one thing I'm good at. But like nowadays, it's been kind of slow, but the cool thing is I now know what I want to deal with and what I don't want to deal with. And I've gotten to the stage of my life, Fabian, where whenever I talk to a new show, I'm working with 2 new shows right now. And they're great. I already told you about one of them, and they're great people. But I do know now what to look out for. And I have a lot of people hit me up. Oh my God, I saw your Facebook and I didn't know you're friends with so and so and all that stuff. You don't do that fanboy shit. We don't do that. I've never seen you like, oh my. The only time I saw you nerd out and it was funny is when you and Donkey Lips were singing. But that was, that was just you going back. You even said, hey, I'm going to go back to my 8-year-old self. But that's cool. But I when people reach out to me like, oh man, I want to interview so and so, and I can read it now. I'm more smarter than I was as far as reading it. And I have remorse, dude. I have remorse about some podcasters that I had falling out with. I really do. A couple. But sometimes we do stupid shit and we say stupid shit, But nothing is, we learn, man. That's what I'm saying. We learn. Yeah. But I'm happy with the stuff. But yeah, I do have a thankless job. But for me, it's cool to make a couple dollars. It's really cool to see, hey, you grew up watching this man or woman forever. Now you get to nerd out with them for an hour. That's cool stuff, man. I don't know.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. And it's been really, really cool being able to connect with some of those people. Bruce Valanche, Hollywood Squares, Larry Hank and all the stuff he's done. I think even, like you mentioned, it wasn't directly through you, but you helped bridge that gap, and I got to talk to Tommy Chong, man. And a lot of people
that was all Rico, man. That wasn't me. I just said, hey, man.
Well, had you not put me in contact with Rico, I wouldn't have known, how to do that.
I know that's true, but that was his doing, Rico's, not mine.
But you see, it's that being open to being open. That's what I'm saying. Let's say at some point I would have just been like, well, you know what, Steven, I don't really want to deal with you anymore because some of the people that you sent me, like, they either became more successful or they didn't. Or if I would have said, like, I don't want to talk to those people anymore. Like, you're just sending me people that, they're not interesting or they're not going anywhere. Well, that would have been it between you and I would have never gotten in contact with with Rico, who got me in contact with Tommy Chong. And and so sometimes you just have to be patient, right? And be, open to again, just talking to anybody, and sometimes things work out that way. And, I enjoyed that one probably the most because
I was going to ask you. Who's your favorite? Okay, so Tommy was your favorite. Okay, who was? I don't want to say least favorite, but who was one you did? And it's I think I know the answer to this one, but who was one you did? It's like, man, that was like a root canal. I think I know who it is.
You know what? No. I've got an even worse one. And it is somebody.
It's okay. So go ahead.
It was somebody you sent me, and we talked about it afterwards. And I'm going to mention this name because I mentioned it on a past podcast before, and it's because it got really weird. Okay, this guy named Dylan, I forget his last name. He was a the actor.
Dylan Law.
I don't remember his last name.
No, not Law. No, he lived. Oh my, yes, that dude. Oh my God.
Yeah, he was like a really he wasn't very good. He was like this Bulgarian
He looked like a Jesus type dude. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Schizo Jesus, yes.
Yeah, Schizo Jesus. He's in.
Yes. Okay, that was the absolute worst interview I've ever done because he was completely drugged out. Right. And he was saying some off the wall shit. But he thought it was great, and the surprising thing here, I got amazing numbers on that. Like on YouTube.
That's the shit that happens right there, man. It's like okay, so the guy he's talking about to your listeners is a guy named Dylan, and we hope that he's okay.
I do, yeah.
I do, but this guy reached out to me when I was in San Diego a long time ago, right? Mr. Joyner, and I said, I said, man, I'm not Ed McMahon at Star Search. I remember telling him like, hey, no, for real. I said, if I put you on a show, what are you going to talk about? Well, I want to do this and I want to do that, and that's great, but you haven't done anything prior. You have nothing. No offense, but you haven't done anything. And I just had a bad vibe, right? So he reached out to me. It was a year ago. I remember that was a year ago. And he said, oh, can I hire you for a month? And he did hire me. And I said, all right, kid, I'll put you on some shows. He's all, can I get on the Rosie O'Donnell show? I'm like, no, I'm not that. Like, no, I don't. Anyway, so he had a troubled past, and I really don't know what the hell he did, Fabian. He actor. That's all, actor. but that was very vague. But you were one of like 8 people that said, I will not have that dude on, or that guy. He spooked people out. Like he was creepy and shit, but he was on one show and he started talking very sexual stuff, like weird shit, man. Like checked out, man. And then I don't know, but I do know who you're talking about. I hope he's all right.
I do too, but here's the thing, like, and I played this on one of my previous episodes. Every 10 episodes, I do something called the shit show with my high school friends. And we covered this, and and they're like, what the hell was up with that Dylan guy? I'm like, let me tell you, because after the show, right, he has like this weird social media, like, hey, everybody, he was like posting as somebody else saying, hey, everybody, Dylan is in the hospital. We don't know if he's going to make it.
I remember the death. Yeah, the dying.
And I reached out to you. I'm like, hey, I know you work with this guy and you put him on podcast. Like, you might want to check in, man. I think he's like in bad, I think he's in bad health or something. Like,
yeah, I do. I'm sorry. I'm losing it. I remember this. He was fine. I just want to see what people do.
Mm-hmm. You wanted to get attention.
I'm like, now, yeah.
I guess there was a falling out between you and him, and he left me all of these voicemails, right? He's like, hey, I want to do your podcast again. And I thought to myself, like, nah, man, like you and I worked, together. And I'm not going to, purposely, I guess, he made it known that you and him had a falling out. I'm not going to do that. Like, why am I going to do that? Right. And on top of that, he had a shitty interview. So he left me a voicemail saying like, let's do it again. I'm really excited. You're a great interviewer. Reach out to me. I ignored it. Well, no, I didn't ignore it actually, because I got a new phone. I didn't know how to work the voicemail. And so like, I didn't hear it. And then I had another voicemail, like, I want to say days apart. And it was like, well, you haven't reached out to me, but I'm really sad. Like, Stephen Joyner's a liar. Like, don't listen to anything he says, blah, blah, blah. But let's do this podcast. And he ends it with, I love you. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like,
oh my God.
Jesus.
Yeah, he was a trip, man. He was a trip and a half.
And then
okay. You got a third one?
Third voicemail.
Oh my God.
Right. And this one, he just wasn't having it. Right. And he's like, well, you must be kissing Stephen Joyner's ass really hard because you haven't gotten back to me. I thought we could do this podcast again and get great numbers. Reach out or don't. Have a nice life. I'm like, all right. And I played it for my friends and we all had a laugh, but I'm like, this guy's a fucking nutcase, man.
That's the guy that would put a dead cat on your front door. I'm telling you that man. I mean, we should be laughing, but when Fabian and I are like, we hope he's okay. I really do hope he's okay.
Yeah.
Like God help, because that dude was. So that was your worst. Do you remember? Oh man, there's been a few doozies, man. there's been a few. You interviewed my old teacher, didn't you?
I don't know. Who was that?
Scott Hopkins?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. No, I don't think you did. I thought you did, but there's been some good ones. There's been some weird ones.
Yeah, there have been some interesting ones for sure.
I think one of if I had to say my favorite interviews that I set up, Juan Vasquez is fucking badass, man. He's funny. When he's talking about, do you remember when you interviewed him?
Actually, no, I've been waiting on him. We're trying to set it up.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But I have been in contact with him, and he's a really cool guy.
He was in the paranormal activities. He's a nurse, but dude, he's a trip. But besides Tommy, who else has been one of your favorite interviews?
Oh man, there's been a bunch of them. So I mean, obviously, the Hankin ones that you helped me set up.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten some other ones on my end where
on your end. It doesn't have to be from me. Who do you like?
Definitely Donkey Lips. I think that one was super interesting. And again, the 8-year-old in me was super happy, right? But also, I've had some others that kind of like surprised me at how good they were. And I'm scrolling through right now all the different ones I've done, right? And I've done a bunch, man. But like one of them, I think that was really interesting. I don't even remember how I met this guy, but he's from Wales, right? And he was like a comedian from Wales. And I've never talked to any Welsh people, right? But it was cool, man, because he had a stutter and he was explaining to me how that kind of hinders everything. And it just became a really cool conversation about, the subtle differences between America and Europe and things like that. And it was a really good, almost like we were friends for a while, and I got that kind of feedback too from people like, hey, that was really good. Like, I think it's at that point, they're like, I think it's your best interview so far. And again, it's one of these people who is kind of like and again, not in a derogatory way, but, a nobody, right? And we had, and I'm a nobody, and we had a conversation, and it was a good, interesting conversation. If you're a fly on the wall in that conversation, like, you're going to be entertained, but that one was probably one of my surprise ones where I'm like, that did come out pretty good.
I'm going to tell you a story that no one knows about. Nobody knows. You don't even know this. And this is comical because I feel bad, but we're just, okay. I worked with a show in Canada about 5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And he was a great dude. I won't say his name. He had a stutter. And it was when he got excited, happy, mad, whatever, he has a stutter. He felt bad. And I would say, slow down, I'd be like, and he was doing the podcast to help ease his stutter, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I put a guest on his show who was a comedian. And this guy failed to mention to me that he had Tourette's syndrome. Oh my God. 30 minutes of the most cringy interview you ever heard. Because he had the Tourette's where you swear. Mm. And so I won't get into detail, but when the host had to struggle, this dude, I mean, it got bad. That's the worst show I ever did. I turned my phone off.
No, I mean, I've had some bad ones, but nothing's gonna ever top, Dylan. I think it was Dylan Kelly.
Dylan Kelly, yeah, that was his name. Yeah,
nothing will ever top that, or I mean, not top it at this point. I guess nothing will ever, seep any lower than that, because that was it was uncomfortable. And you know what's funny? Podcasters after that you've worked with afterwards reached out to me because they wanted to interview him as well, or they already did, and they're like, hey, was this guy kind of weird on your show? I'm like, yeah, and they're like, I don't think I'm going to put this out, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's probably a good idea.
It was bad. I tried, man. I mean, no, he hired me, and I farmed him. I sent him out on shows. Hey, and then he didn't show up, or I would get calls. The 3 guys in Indianapolis that we know would be like, we can't have him on, Steve. We'll interview anybody, with this guy. It's just literally this dude's too weird. Yeah. There's something wrong. I mean, and I had one show that interviewed him and said, I think he was doing drugs on the show. I'm like, what? He said, dude, I think he was smoking. Fuck. I'm literally weird stuff. So, yeah. Oh, well, I said, I hope he's, but yeah, so it's an adventure. You never know. But he, I don't know. You look at this, it's going to be there forever. And you look at these things. For me, it's putting these things together started out as by accident, and then it grew into something bigger. Mm-hmm. And right now is kind of a slow time, but I like it like this, Yeah. I like dealing with who I deal with. You're in a set group of people that I know, always reliable. And we've had conversations, you and I, about real life shit, man. Mm-hmm. About health, about weight loss, about, real stuff. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how long has it been since you talked to Chewy?
I have him on Facebook now, so I don't know. So it's I gotta get in touch with them and see if we can do something together. Well, there's a guy named Jesus who does a show in Tucson, and I go way back with him. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but we became friends, man. I talked to him the day before his father died. I said, hey, man, I lost my dad. It's that type of friendship you build. Right. Yeah.
And when I say thankless job, I mean it sometimes. You feel that way too. It's like, oh, hey, thanks. And then they don't reach out to you. Hey, Fabian, happy birthday. Hey, man, how you doing? It's like, oh, Fabian, remember me? I'm that guy with that book that I wrote about suicide 2 years ago. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, I haven't mentioned you, but I need to go back on your show because I have a new shitty book that I want to show. It's like, dude, good to hear from you. I'm doing good. Thank you. No, I'm serious. There are people like that. And anybody who hears this, it's not just what we're talking about, podcasts in general in life. Mm-hmm. If you have a friend who is only there when it's convenient for them, fucking 86 them. Mm-hmm. I'm dead serious about it. Oh, hey, man, because those motherfuckers suck. They do. And in our business, Fabian, they come and go. But then there's friends that were like, hey man, we click. How you doing? You doing good? I always make it a point to see how the person's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, oh hey, I haven't talked to you in a year because you're of no value to me. But now I want to go back on your show because I have something to whore out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, fuck you, man. That's when you get a little resentful right there.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. So we talked about a lot, Stephen, but I want to see, before we close out, I like to keep it, about an hour or so all the time. So is there anything else you want to throw out there, man? Anything else you want to throw out there to the podcast world?
Listen to Ignorance is Strength.
Oh, that's perfect.
I would say if you're breaking into the podcast business, no. If you do, you really know what you want to do and do it. Seriously, anybody who's listening to this who wants to be a podcaster, just take pride in what you do. It's not always about the guests. It's what you do. If you, and don't worry about if they don't like it. Fuck the Joneses. If you like it, make it happen. And if, for me, I'm always around. I'm easy to find. I'll put people on your show and just support each other, podcasters, and promote each other. I mean,
sure.
Look, Rico is okay. Real quick, you met him through me as a guy I worked with. You cross promoted, but he did something he didn't have to do. He's like, hey man, you want to talk to Tommy? Let me hook it up. Get involved. Anybody who hears this is a podcaster, current or starting, or even in it for 2 years, said, man, this sucks. It's the people you associate with. Get involved with people that will help you. And don't go to those groups and be like, here's my link, follow me, because they're never going to do that shit.
Nope.
I'm sorry, they just never will. And I don't know. I would say just support each other, help build each other up. Those downloads can come by you guys listening to each other and pushing the shit.
Yep.
That's
anywhere anybody could reach you online or anything you want to throw out there as far as social media or contact?
Yeah, you can find me at Thresher PR. You can also find me on Facebook. My email is Steve, STEV, network at gmail.com. And if you contact me and say that you're a fan of Ignorance is Strength, you'll get 2 weeks free. I don't know. I'll hook you up. Fabian can tell you, I will hook you up. To the best of my ability. I'll get you in touch with people. But I know this is weird for me to say this. I'm not always necessary for a show to be successful at all. I'm not. I'm humble about this shit. I'm real about this shit. Yes, I can get you somebody that you thought you'd never meet, and hooray, right? But really, it's how much you put into it and how much you enjoy doing it.
Yep.
That's the main thing. We're not into hero worship here. Not on this show.
Nope, absolutely not. But I do want to thank you, Stephen, for being on. I mean, I know we've been in contact for 3 years, but I mean, this is the first time having you on. So pretty cool for me because now those people that have been listening and every time I mention, hey, Stephen Joyner got me this person or whatever, now they know who you are. So that's really cool. So I appreciate it, man.
You got it, Fabian. Talk to you soon.
Definitely. And for everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night.
Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.